Okay, so today we're going to talk about the first part of our reverse engineering project, which is the visual analysis. And to do that, we've got to kind of discuss what goes into the visual design of a product. And so a lot of this is going to be me pretending to be an art teacher for a little bit, but um, hang in there with me, okay? So we're talking today about the elements and the principles of design. And so the elements are going to be the things that you can use in your design, and the principles are going to refer to how you use those elements. So kind of keep that in mind as we go through here. So the elements that we're going to be talking about are these 8. We've got points, lines, color, value, shape, form, space, and texture. If you want to go ahead and write those down now, leave some room between them. We're going to talk about each of those in a second here. So first one here we've got is point. You can kind of see Project Lead the Way's description here of point. I'm not going to read that to you, but one thing to kind of keep in mind is, typically speaking, a point is not going to be something that kind of exists on its own. You might have a point where two lines meet or something like that, but a point is not just going to probably be sitting here just like this. So keep that in mind. It might be a shape like a circle that kind of is representing a point or something like that, but not just a point on its own usually. So next one we've got here is a line. This is only like a length dimension, but something to keep in mind here. When we're talking about design here, we might stretch that definition to something more like this, where we could call those lines, even though they do definitely have a width. So lines can be used to do these things. Define a boundary for like a shape, indicate a volume. We've done that with three-dimensional drawings. We can create perspective and depth. We can use lines to create textures. And these last ones here are kind of the ones to think about. Lines can be used to either suggest movement or imply a motion. So that's kind of when you're going to get into these different types of lines, either vertical, horizontal, diagonal, or curved, representing some different emotions or different feelings that they're supposed to bring out in you. So vertical lines, you've got their dignity, formality, stability, strength. You'll see a lot of vertical lines in things like government buildings and monuments. Horizontal lines, calm, peace, relaxation. You'll see those in things like hospitals and office buildings. Diagonal lines, action and activity. And curved lines, kind of freedom and natural going on there. And so you can see some examples here of vertical lines, skyscrapers, government, monument, things like that. Horizontal lines, you've got some office building kind of things going on there. Diagonal lines, so you've seen diagonal lines like that before. And curved lines, a little more free-form, natural going on there. Next up, we've got color. So color is going to be described by a couple of different qualities. You've got the hue, which is the actual color itself. The value is lightness or darkness of the color. And then the saturation is the purity or intensity relative to a gray. What I want you kind of thinking of here is, if you've ever used the custom color chooser on any program, really, you've usually had a bar across the right-hand side that kind of goes up and down through the different hues, and then the little box that you can drag around for each particular hue you might pick. You usually have this box over to the left that you can drag left or right for value and up or down for saturation. You've also got things like color temperature to think about, warm colors, cool colors. What does that make you feel when you use colors like that? Why would I tend to use reds and oranges versus blues and greens? Then we've got talking about value here. This is the relative lightness or darkness of a color. You might choose to use, a specific value of your color for lots of different reasons here. For one example, you can use darker colors to show depth. Next up, we've got shape. So a shape is a two-dimensional shape enclosed by those lines. Kind of similar to lines, you've got kind of these different types of lines: geometric, mechanical, organic. Think about what different shapes like that make you feel. The organic is more of that free form, like the curves, where the mechanical is a little bit more ordered, geometric a little simpler. So you can even kind of mix those together. So something like this, you can see there's definitely some organic aspects to it, but also some mechanical. Next up, we've got form. This is just a three-dimensional version of a shape. And the big thing here is you have the same kind of idea. You can have these kind of geometric shapes, a little bit more free-form, organic shapes, or more mechanical shapes. There you just see some examples of different forms. Next up, we've got space. So space is the area around parts of an image. And so we've got two different types of space, the positive space and the negative space. The positive space is kind of the main focus of the image, and then the negative space is what's around it. And you can kind of see here an example of a picture where they're using that idea of kind of flipping the space idea around. The focus of this picture is on the what's not there kind of part. It's kind of interesting when you think about it. Okay, and I think this is our last one, is texture. This is how the surface will look or feel. And so even if you keep things like color the same, a different texture is going to still give you a different visual going on there. So it can be rough. It might look a little bit darker. If it's smooth, it's going to reflect light more and look a little bit brighter. Okay, and then our last thing here is the principles of design. So these are going to be the ways in which you can use the elements. So one thing I really like to keep focusing on when I talk about these, there's no such thing as just having balance in a design. You've got to have a balance in one or more of those elements. You could have balance in the colors or balance in the form, but it can't just be balance on its own. So balance is exactly what you think it is. It's the left to right balance, or the symmetry that's present in a design. And so we have two different types here of symmetrical and asymmetrical. And then you've also got radial symmetry, which is kind of a little bit different. So symmetrical is exactly what you think it should be, where the left and right side are pretty much mirror images of each other. Now, they're never going to be exactly the same, but close enough is kind of the idea we're going for here. Next up, we've got asymmetrical or informal balance. One of the big things here is even though the left and the right side are different, you're usually adjusting other parts of it to kind of make up for it. So here we've got a larger object closer to the center and a smaller object further away. On this side, we've got kind of a shorter building, but it's wider. This one's a taller building, but it is narrower. So they still balance even though they're different. Then we've got radial balance. Anything composed around a circular design is radial balance. Next up, we've got emphasis. So this is using any of those elements to draw your eye to a specific point. So they might use the lines to bring your attention to a place. They might use the color to bring your attention someplace. But that's emphasis, trying to draw your eye to a specific point. You can see an example there. Now, very similar to that is contrast. A lot of times, contrast and emphasis can be the same thing, but they definitely don't have to be. So you could draw your eye to a specific point with contrast, but anytime you have differences between two different parts of a picture or design with any of those different design elements, you've got contrast. So here we've got vertical lines, very bright and smooth textures. Here you've got more horizontal lines, rough textures, darker colors. Very much contrast there. You can use contrast to help you emphasize elements or just make things stand out. So here the black and white, rest of the car, and the yellow people show that contrast. Next up, we've got rhythm. There are 4 types of rhythm. Regular rhythm is going to be the one you're thinking of, where something just repeats over and over again, like so. Random rhythm is the repetition of an element in an irregular interval. Something to keep in mind with these is just because the design looks like it has random rhythm, typically that means that it's taken a lot of effort to make it look that way. Next up, we've got gradated. So gradated is the same element, but different sizes. So repeating and getting smaller or repeating and getting bigger. That's kind of the biggest deal with gradated. And then the last one we've got is graduated rhythm. Repeated element is getting closer or further apart. So you've got these dots here are further apart here, but they get closer down in the corners and up in this corner. Next one we've got is proportion. So these are the relative sizes of different items in a design. So you see different designs that play around with proportion and how they make an object look. Next up, second to last here, I believe, is unity. So this is anytime you have the consistent use of a single element. So if you have a design that uses the same kind of horizontal lines over and over again, or the same set of colors over and over again, that's an example of unity. And then the last one here is economy. So this is the use of the bare minimum of elements. And this is harder than you might think it is, because it's pretty easy to keep adding on different design elements to make things look the way you want them. It's very hard to make it the bare minimum, to remove everything that's extra. So take a look out and see if you can see some things where they've really put a lot of effort into removing design elements from their product. Okay, so the thing you're going to be doing, you can start it today, but really tomorrow, is you're going to be taking some products from around your house or around the school, depending on where you're at, and we're going to be doing a visual analysis of that item. And so what that's going to mean is it's going to be looking at the item. The first thing I want you to do is to identify the elements that are used in that item. Now, they won't all be in there. So you can look through and say, okay, so in this item, we see some lines. There's some straight lines. There's some circular lines. There's some curved lines. It's definitely got color, bright red and green. It's got some geometric shapes. We got a solid form, rectangles, the circles. We've got the space here. The circular openings create some negative space, and it looks pretty smooth. After you've gone through and identified the elements, then I want you to look at how those elements are used. So, for example, if you're looking at the lines here, well, in this case, there's contrast in the lines. There's the curved top and the straight edges on the sides. In the shapes, there's a regular repeated rhythm of the circular holes. That's something I want you to keep in mind. It's not possible to just say balance without having a element that is balanced. So fill out the top part first, then go back and look at how they're used. If you put something in the top, it should definitely show up down here. If there's nothing up there, then there won't be anything in that row. So that's something I just want you to keep in mind. Come back to this example if you think about it, because this is something a lot of you haven't done before. And so, just kind of look at the fact that there's more white space than there are actually filled in. Not everything is there. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly show you where that assignment is. So if you go to the home page here on Tuesday, you've got 2.2.1 practice assignment. If you're watching this video in one of the in-person classes, this is just to go over what we've talked about in class. Your assignment will be posted on one of those days too. So in here, it's one of these attached Google Docs where you fill it out and hit submit. So when it loads up, you're going to see some directions along the top here. If you want to open it up, you certainly can. So you've got some directions along the top. Just a quick reminder of what the elements and principles are. There's your directions. You're going to identify 2 products from around your house. I do want you to paste a picture into here of each one, just so I know what you're talking about. And then we're going to go down here, and you've got these matrices, these tables to fill out. One thing you can do is if you want them to fit in here really nicely, feel free to make your text pretty small. And if something's kind of like going off the end of the page, you can always shrink one of these up to get it to fit if you want to worry about that. But you fill out one of these tables for each of the items that you identified, and then you should be able to go back here, and there should be a nice submit button for you when you're done with that. So with that, I guess, if you're in the online class, I will see you on Wednesday. Otherwise, for everybody else, I guess I will see you later.